Thank you so much. Just a very quick update on what's going on with the International Women in Biomechanics group. We have our Twitter team is putting out a quarterly paper, very much driven by Freya. We have a new quarterly paper come out by Dr. Joanna Reeves. So we really encourage you to check those out. They're a really fun kind of way to present your science in tweet form. And we would love to feature your work and highlight the work of women scientists and biomechanists. So please send us a Twitter DM or message us on Slack or however you want. Get in touch and we can share your research. I'll pass it to Alexa to give a brief update on the blogs. And if she's not here, which I don't see her quite yet, we have a lot of blogs coming out. They're really helpful information, everything from tips and tricks on writing grants to mindfulness and meditation and staying sane in these crazy times. So when you have time, please check them out. They're really fun and educational. And if you want to write a blog yourself, it's a really good science communication practice. So check those out. Another quick update is we have a really exciting announcement. We've been invited by the World Congress of Biomechanics Committee to have a special session hosted by IWB. So we are still planning what this session could look like, but if you are attending World Congress of Biomechanics, or if not, and you just want to be involved and kind of shape what this session could look like and connect women in biomechanics all across the world, please reach out to us. You can reach out to me, Anna Ebrahimi, or email us. However you want to get in touch, let us know, because we are looking to plan this session. And it could be social, it could be an actual informative keynote session, and really make it what we want. So, all right. And then is Rosti here? Oh, no, she's no. Okay. Romana, do you want to just kind of share our next meeting?
Hi, so our next meeting in November is the reschedule of Professor Damien Lacrosse from the University of Sheffield. He will be discussing living a fulfilling life and career in personal life, which I know I can use some tips on, so hopefully you can too. This is a new time, so please keep that in mind. It's Wednesday, November the 3rd at noon GMT, so that's noon London time, 11 p.m. Sydney, and 8 a.m. New York. So please keep that in mind, but obviously the links and things will be sent out in accordance, so hope to see you there.
And this is our last announcement, and I'll pass it to Amanda to introduce our guests for today.
All right, everyone, I am excited to hear our speakers tonight, because when I had the conversation with us, I think we all just had a great time laughing and talking and discussing biomechanics and life. We are here with 3 representatives of the BASIS Biomechanics Division. We have Dr. Theodore, sorry, Theo. Theo,
Theo is absolutely fine. Easier for everyone.
Who is a lecturer in biomechanics at Lancaster University, and also a membership representative on the BASIS committee. We have Rachel Mason, who is a PhD student at Northumberland University, and is a CPD advisor on the committee, and Dr. Andrew Mitchell, who is associate dean and reader in biomechanics at University of Bedfordshire, and also the chair of the biomechanics division. So we are looking forward to hearing y'all speak on not just what BASIS is doing, but also your career within biomechanics, and Theo will kick us off.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. Listen, when I got my degree, the guy who was reading the degrees out found it difficult with my surname. So don't feel bad. It's on the tape, a VHS tape. Probably most of you would not remember VHS tapes, but I have a VHS tape with the guy trying to pronounce the name, and it was just not happening. So we moved on to the degree award. I suppose I've got the privilege of starting first, so I'll be the first to say thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much for having me to well, talk about me, I guess, in terms of how I got here. And it goes without saying, I would like to reinforce what you said there, Amanda, in terms of developing more relationships with the group, strengthening the collaboration, promoting IWB and basis in biomechanics, of course, but generally, and it's really good to see that IWB is taken up and you already have a slot in a massive conference. So that's really good. If you now give me 2 seconds to work out how I can share, yes, my screen. We use Teams a lot at work and not Zoom very much. So, oh, I know that's the wrong window. Are you seeing my screen? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I will try and be brief, and I'm hoping that this will maybe initiate some discussion, some questions. What I try to do is give you a bit of an overview of everything that I did in one slide. So we'll see how successful that has been. And I suppose the very first point of the start of this journey is when I was still back home in Greece. Perhaps at that point, I should say, when I get excited, like today, I tend to speak very fast with very strong accents. So if I do go faster, if my accent gets stronger halfway through, please either stop me, hands up, or tell me to slow down. I will not be offended. So I used to swim quite a bit. I was a 1500 meters swimmer, and also play quite a bit of water polo, which is quite big in Greece. And I liked the aspect of technique and why a particular technique would make me swim faster, or would make me come off the blocks faster, or would make me shoot better, or those were the kind of things that intrigued me. I like the game, I like the competition. I like to swim faster and the times and the training part. But I was always very intrigued about the science behind it. So that excuse me, that kind of led me to do a sports science degree initially at Coventry University, which is where I completed my undergraduate, which is where my name was a problem to the person awarding the degrees at my graduation. Subsequent to that, I did my MSc at Manchester Metropolitan, and I continued there to complete my PhD. So that's really the background of how I started. And I think it will become clearer, I guess, that interest changed the more that I was learning and the more things that I was doing. Because when I first started my undergrad, I was very keen on swimming, on water polo, and indeed that's what I did my undergraduate dissertation on. Going into my master's degree and learning and seeing more things, I got a bit more interested in muscular performance alone, if I can say that. So I focused more into muscular work, and my dissertation, although involved underwater swimming, was more about the mechanical work of muscles, and then my PhD went on to look at mechanical behavior. So I guess what I'm saying is my interest changed. I came from a very sporting swimming background into this to move a little bit further away, as we will see later on. And during my sort of transition, if you like, from my master's to my PhD, and throughout that, I started working as a part-time lecturer in biomechanics at Manchester Metropolitan. Then I got a full-time lecturing post at Edge Hill University, or Edge Hill College of Higher Education, as it were at the time. From that on, then I moved into University of Cumbria and subsequently to Lancaster University, where I am now. So in terms of my day job, I guess I've always been an academic. I've always been involved in academia, academic posts, engaging with students and engaging with research. However, I've never sort of given up on the practical aspect, I guess. So during my degree and during my master's essentially, I was being a water polo coach primarily during my breaks as a student, so summer, Christmas, Easter. I was coaching water polo back home, and I had women's teams, junior teams, and also assisting with the men's team more on the physical training aspect rather than the coaching aspect. I also did a short, some brief work with British swimming, and we're looking at the Great Britain disability swimming team and looking at biomechanical analysis in terms of race analysis, technique, and so on and so forth. And I continue with the water polo, which is, well, I think as I grow older, I realize that it's very therapeutic for me to go and shout and scream, as it is enjoyable to coach. And I've been coaching the Scottish women's water polo team since 2003. And a lot of this practical work was very interesting to see how things can be applied, how things can be challenging. So I never forgot that theory sometimes is not easy to implement, but it should really form or try to inform at least what we do. Finally, in terms of research, and again, this goes back to the point of changing direction with a more, as I learned more, potentially as I saw more. My initial desire was very much around sports performance. That's how I started my undergrad. That's what I was primarily interested in researching. But I kind of started doing sport performance and muscle mechanics after my master's, and after learning a few more things about this and finding that I was keen and interested. Subsequently, once I did some work with muscles, the aging strand of research came about, and it became obvious that there were, how should I say this, equally successful outcomes, equally satisfying outcomes in helping an athlete be better, as well as somebody having a better quality of life by being able to be independent, walk around, go with the wife to the supermarket, enjoy their grandchildren in the garden. So that sort of drew me a little bit more and developed the active aging group at the institution I was at the time. And through more research, more attraction happened with some NHS colleagues. So some of the research around renal patients, and most recently with surgeons, is around the national health system in the UK and some of the medical personnel within that. So I think it's very easy to see that we started from sort of swimming and how fast can somebody swim and how quickly they can take off the blocks to beat the other guy on the next lane, all the way down to looking into most recently differences in fatigue between robotic surgery and normal traditional surgery, looking at EMG and various other parameters. So it is quite a varied path, probably for some of you or for most of you, and knowing from colleagues, possibly quite different to some of my colleagues, but this is how I came. So it was my finding myself here started from wanting to know more about my own performance in a very simplified way. And then a whole new world opened up from that, or a kind of worms, whichever way you want to look at it. And then it started doing more and learning more and becoming more and more diverse in the topics. I haven't really left stuff behind. So very recently we published a paper on muscular asymmetries in female water polo players. So sporting performance is still there. Aging work is still there. NHS work is still there. So I guess it just becomes more interesting. So that's me. And I realize I've been talking for the last, I said I'll be very brief, and I have not been very brief. That's like 10 minutes now. So I'm more than happy to take questions now, or if Romano, you want to do it later, however you want to run this, I'm more than happy to answer any questions or any thoughts people have.
If anybody have questions, we can take a few, but we also going to do like a group panel at the end. And that was not long at all, so don't feel bad.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Good.
Okay. So Rachel, you are up next.
Yes, I'll share my screen. Can you all see that? I pop it up. Yep.
No.
Nope. Oh, damn.
We saw it at one point, and then I see me.
How about
Now? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm definitely not as far as Theo and Andrew in terms of where I am in sports biomechanics. So I actually started my interest came from doing athletics for 10 plus years. Ended up getting injured, typical, pulling out. Let's study it instead. So I did my undergrad in Loughborough. I did sports and exercise science. As much as I loved it here, I actually didn't continue with competitive sport because it was personally I found it a little bit too elitist, a bit too competitive for me. So I actually lost the love of running a bit. However, for the academic side, it was incredible. And throughout this time here, I actually didn't really engage in many like extracurricular sports biomechanics activities. I did more the general coaching and volunteering academies, hosting events, and I'm actually now aware of other things that they do, so like sports performance courses, you can do like free performance analysis, and even then I went into Loughborough thinking I wanted to do sports psychology, not biomechanics. So I was doing all the psychology modules and just happened to come across biomechanics, and it wasn't until my placement year where I actually went for an internship with the sports surgery clinic. As people are probably familiar with, that Kat used to be the head of the lab there. I was under her wing for a year in Dublin, looking at ACL and brain injuries. And this is where I actually really became familiar with biomechanics. And the whole reason I did the placement was because I knew biomechanics was my weakest area, but it sparked an interest. And working here is then what made me change my focus to biomechanics. And although me and Kat laugh, saying how she put me off, it's actually her fault that I'm still in it, and that I've kind of gone down the route I have. So then after like that placement year, I then changed some of my modules to focus more on biomechanics and kept some psychology in there. So my final year dissertation actually looked at lower limb injury and the psychological changes over 9 months of rehab. So I did 3 cross-sectional studies and asked participants from around the globe just to do a few questionnaires, and after that, that's where I kind of then went more clinical. So post undergrad, I went into the NHS as a clinical technologist at Derby Gate Lab, and alongside this, I just did the typical sports science thing and did a PhD qualification and sports spin. As well, like in the NHS, I was very lucky that I've always had very good relationships with people I work with, like my bosses. And again, the NHS, it was a very small department, and there was certain aspects of that lab that was so different to the clinic, the sports surgery clinic, that I struggled with, seeing people with disabilities coming in struggling to walk compared to the sports surgery clinic where you were getting elite athletes coming in at the peak of their performance to complete ends of the spectrum. And as much as I loved the NHS, after a year, I then changed path slightly to actually look at performance analysis. So a bit of a mixed bag of everything that I've done. So I went to Leicester University, where I did a studentship with the English Institute of Sport, primarily British cycling, doing performance analysis biomechanics. I was there for a year. However, this is also when COVID hit. So I was in the velodrome like 3 days a week, and obviously what would be in the Olympic year, but postponed. And my master's project was completely different to anything I'd done. It was actually a tactical analysis of the Madison event. So over 200 hours of video data, counting positions of athletes and section the track. They're really not biomechanics focused. Although I was quite lucky in the sense that my supervisors were aware of my background in biomechanics and still knew my interest in it. They were pointing me in other directions or letting me sit in on different modules. And then during my time here at Chester, I was doing some freelance work for Hawkeye, just actually kind of in their basic role of football systems analyzer, so setting up the cameras for VAR, sitting goal line, setting up VAR for the referees, sitting in the van, saying if the goal went in or not, and then also doing freelance data analysis for an elite gym, who also did sleep data for Red Bull. So that was just like a little bit on the side, but just to keep things ticking over, and also to kind of explore what I could do with performance analysis. And then again, never intended to do a PhD. I fell into this. Couldn't even see myself doing a master's, and then after the master's, I was like leaving education for sure. However, came across a PhD that really sparks my interest. It's with Northumbria University, but also with an Irish startup company called Danu, and they're actually working with looking at compression socks with built-in pressure plates, but also an IMU. And the whole purpose of my project is to validate the socks against 3D motion capture. So I've then kind of U-turn and gone back to biomechanics, but I'm actually going to put performance analysis spin on it, and then use these socks to for sports performance and sports injury metrics. So we've got some elite football teams on board, as well as various sports, and we're going to try and see this application for injury, but also in gathering performance metrics. And then alongside this, we're actually going to look at it in terms of clinical trials. So again, taking it back to the NHS and seeing if we can use this for stroke patients or Parkinson's patients and see how it can be applied there. As you can see, I've included like a longer timeline, because I think as you can see, my biomechanics journey is kind of only really started latterly coming on, and it's now making me realise how much there is out there that you can engage with. However, I don't have any idea where I want to go post PhD. If I want to continue in applied sport, I'd like to go back into NHS, or if I want to go into research. And that's why I think doing things like bases and additional qualifications will obviously give you the broader spectrum of doing everything. So hopefully, like, by the end of my PhD, I ideally want to get my bases accreditation, in case, because I think that's really rife for sports science practitioners now, is that they're actually asking for that. But then also to do the HCA through my university alongside PhD, in case I do want to go into more of a lecturing role. And you never know, I could end up just opening a dog cafe, or we'll see. So yeah, that's a bit of condensed version of mine. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. I don't think I noticed that you was a fellow Loughborough grad, so
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Anyone else anyone has any questions for her before we move to Andrew?
Kat, do not ask me anything.
And don't if you don't think of anything now, it is okay. We will be doing group questions later, but I do not see any raised hands or anything. So Andrew, my fellow SECer is up.
Yeah. Thank you. So let me just make sure I've got it. I wanted to do. Okay, so to completely veer in an opposite direction to my colleagues Rachel and Theo, who crammed very impressive careers into one slide. I kind of went the opposite way, but so we'll be going through quickly. As I sat down with I've got a 17-year-old daughter, and I sat down with my daughter the other week, and I said that I was going to make this presentation, and she said, yes, yeah, she's a very strong-willed 17-year-old feminist, which I'm very proud of. And she's like, well, you know, how are you going to empathize with the people that you're talking to? So I kind of I had a bit of thinking time while I was out on a run, and I wanted to share this slightly different view on kind of my experiences. Okay. So I kind of looked at a similar kind of journey, but with a different path, but then with similar challenges. And so I started looking, kind of reflecting. And I'm clearly not a woman working within STEM, but I've definitely faced challenges. And I think the lessons from some of those challenges might actually be beneficial to other people as well. So I'm just going to go through. So this first slide is of a hospital in London called Great Ormond Street Hospital. It's one of the best children's hospitals in the world. And I was taken there 40 odd years ago. So I was born with spina bifida, which is a quite significant spinal cord injury or condition, disease. And was told at the time, they said to my parents, he's not going to walk. There's no real, they weren't very cuddly about it. They basically said he's kind of done. We'll do the surgery. We'll kind of patch him up, and then we'll give you some physio, and we'll kind of send you out on your way. But that was I was blessed by having very fortunate medics to look after me. And about, I think it's 28. My mum says 28 surgeries later, I start walking, albeit with what I referred to as an acquired gait. And then kind of swimming against the tide and fighting against, at the time, what was very strict late 70s, early 80s kind of norms, stereotypes, expectations, because on a form it said I had a disability. They wanted to send me to a special needs school, but my parents were saying, well, his brain we think is normal. There's no reason to suggest he can't go to a state school. So my parents had to even fight to get me into a state school because they wanted to put me into a school for people with kind of mental disabilities, such as Down syndrome. And my family very close to Down syndrome because my auntie was born with Down syndrome. So we're very aware that wasn't the right environment for me. So my parents started fighting. So I kind of thought some of the challenges I've fought in my life may be relevant to some of the type of challenges that colleagues in this call might have actually come across. So there are definitely some hard times. But I think that when we have those hard times, we have to then look at the support network of the people around us. And for me, I was blessed to have an amazing support network. So very strong-willed parents. I've got a very traditionally English dad and a Maltese mother. So Theo and I often talk about our kind of Mediterranean roots. A very strong-willed mother who's not going to allow them to send her kid to a special school. He doesn't need to go there. I was blessed by strong parents, a sister who was the best kid in school at absolutely everything that I had to follow in the footsteps of. I use Sarah Mitchell's brother, who's still ringing in my ears my entire education up to the age of 18. Very strong-willed family as well, supporting me. Some good friends, still got the same friendship groups when I was little. And then all the way along, kind of a strong support network of teachers, lecturers, and more recently, collaborators. And then some very, very good coaches and teammates. Also some insight into kind of toxic masculinity at that point, which I'm pleased I learned from and observed, and that kind of taught me some things, kind of observing the way some male athletes and coaches act. Then blessed blessed to meet my wife on an airplane over the Atlantic, true story, on an airplane going from Boston in the US to London Heathrow. And then blessed, even though the doctor said that I wouldn't be able to have children, to have one daughter who is, like I said, just applied to go to medical school. And yeah, she's a pretty bright kid. I'm blessed there. So, but then I also kind of thought about other people that have influenced me. And the most important group of individuals influenced my upbringing outside of that network were the medical teams and the support staff at Great Ormond Street Hospital, and then subsequently Guy's Hospital in London, where I went when I was 14 and onwards. And that was a wonderfully diverse group of staff from male and female, but from the Caribbean, from Middle East, South Asia. And I was really blessed to be supported and looked after by people who kind of giving their time and their life to support a kid like you. And then obviously very blessed and lucky to have a good undergraduate dissertation supervisor. I'll talk a little bit later, but when I was in the US, I spent a lot of time within the Lady Vol, that's the University of Tennessee, within their sports medicine department, which was a great experience. A very, very positive and supportive PhD supervisor, and then subsequent line managers in my career. But the strangest thing happened when I was writing this presentation and just finishing off, and I looked at this image on the screen. I didn't realize until yesterday, if you see that the ones slightly shaded in gray, the majority of which are, or shall I say all of which are actually female. So very strong-willed mother, dad's a kind of sensible one in the background, but mum's the one who pushed me to do anything, obviously sister, some kind of amazing family members and wife and daughter. But then if we look beyond that, my undergrad dissertation supervisor was Dr. Rosemary Dyson, who then also became my PhD supervisor down at Chichester. The Lady Vol Sports Medicine Department, when I was there in the late 90s, was only female staff working with the female athletes, and I was one of about 5 males working in that facility and within that group, which is a blessing. For those of you who know much about female sport and basketball in the US, it was during the Pat Summitt era when the Lady Vols were best female basketball team in the country. And then also every line manager I've had, so I've had 3 proper jobs in my life, apart from working for my dad when I was a kid. So at University of Hertfordshire, University of Chichester, and here at the University of Bedfordshire, I've had strong female leadership and line management, which I think is really, really positive. And beyond that, they then taught me a lot of things that your any disability or any preconceptions people have of you. These are things that take no ability and no academia. It's not about kind of your socioeconomic background, but these are all things you can do to make you stand out from the crowd and be considered for things and be perceived to be doing a good job in the university's situation. And equally, it works perfectly well in sport as well. But if you look at those images, I have a poster of this. I have this image on the wall in my office. I think those things are absolutely huge, and that network of people I showed on the previous slide, in different ways, have all been pushing me towards achieving those things, both professionally and in some ways as an athlete, which I might get onto in a second. So there were quite great expectations, and it gets to the point where people expect things of you. So there is a certain amount of pressure for you to exceed. But what I loved about academia is it was a place where I could show the people who thought I wasn't good enough to go to a mainstream school that I, in fact, was a harder worker than them. I was in some ways cleverer than them, especially some of the social workers who asked the most bizarre questions. And they'd come every year to just check that I still had spina bifida and then it hadn't healed from the year before, which those who know anything about the condition is just laughable. But anyway, so I found sport and I found academia to be the environment that enabled me to succeed. But a lot of things had to be addressed by myself. But sport that's me top left. What I always get, this is the earliest photograph of me in sport. What I'm slightly concerned about is it looks like I'm not actually in the race because I'm not actually in one of the lanes. I don't know if you can tell. I'm stood in front of the headmistress. They put me in an extra lane, but I do seem to be winning. My parents are convinced I won that race. But to be honest, it sparked a whole world of sport. I ended up playing American football, which for a kid with spina bifida, you can imagine parents were going nuts. Played for the Irish national team, and then over in the US for a while. and got some good experiences out of that. Subsequent to realizing at 35 that everything hurts after American football, and it takes longer and longer to heal up, started going towards endurance sport, and I run kind of marathons again with a very adaptive gait, because I basically can't plantar flex on my left foot. So if you can imagine, last week I ran the London Marathon and not being able to plantar flex on a single calf raise I can't do on my left foot. Some clinicians probably wouldn't even let me go. I would fail a return to sport test on that, but you kind of just adapt, don't you? But also blessed in very strange ways to see different things through sport. So top left, I was out running in New Hampshire and I saw a family of brown bears, wild brown bears, which is quite scary. Swam with seals over in the US as well. And then bottom right is something called bioluminescence. I was swimming at night in Cape Cod in the US, and that is like, they're the equivalent of waterborne or water-based fireflies. So when you swim, that stuff lights up, so brilliant. And then just to kind of add things, add some challenges, and I love these photographs because I look in absolute agony in 2 out of 3. I do Ironmans, not this year because it was the one I was on this year cancelled, but yeah, it's again another arena where I can kind of prove that I'm doing all right and I'm kind of progressing. What's amazing about that is you reflect on your own biomechanics of swimming. I could talk to Theo about it because my swim's okay, it's not great. When I'm on the bike for that long, I get off and the neck pain I have is probably about an 8 out of 10 because of my spine rifter, and then adding in then a cool down of a marathon is quite painful too. I'm definitely not near the front. I'm not pretending I'm some kind of impressive athlete, but I always just about beat the cutoff time, which for me is the achievement in itself. So yeah, I've done 6 of those. But then I also find that you have to then have CPD, and I refer to this as kind of continuing personal development rather than professional development. And the things that you have to then develop, which I think again, things talking about colleagues who are working in a male-dominated environment and kind of working through STEM, is things such as resilience, independence, courage, self-confidence, and integrity. And I think if you have those, they're not necessarily things you'd normally add on to a CV, but they're things that definitely people are going to give you references and people are going to support you if you're trying to collaborate with them for research potentially, or new projects or in consultancy. And those kind of traits are very profound. And if you kind of get labeled as someone's having those strengths and those traits, I think it's quite positive. So I was very blessed to go to undergraduate at University of Chichester. I applied to one university and I loved it. And I was, again, like I said, blessed to find that institution because I only applied to one. And then did my undergraduate degree, sport and exercise or sports science. And then my dissertation in those days, so this was 1995, we got it, or I wrote to all those companies at the bottom and they all sent me trainers for my dissertation, which nowadays you would never get. So that's undergraduate dissertation, looking at ground reaction forces in different running shoes, and started looking at about how maybe the structure of the shoe might give you more of a push off, which in relation to recent running shoe technology is actually quite novel and interesting. Well, to be fair, at its time it was, yeah, people weren't talking about how shoes could contribute to performance, but now it's every day. I then went over to the University of Tennessee in the US. After spending I spent a year at a smaller university called Campbell University in North Carolina, just to do some postgrad classes, even though I already had, to do some undergrad classes, even though I already had an undergrad degree, but I just wanted to get some sports medicine classes and skills there. And then I had interviews at Tennessee, Michigan State, Ball State, and I think Indiana was the last one. And I'd just gone on a little road trip for the interviews, and I went there and met the professor, Wendell Lamone, who showed me around campus, introduced me to Peyton Manning, literally, and then I was sold and I called up Yale University. So again, told them I wasn't going to go to interview, and I was just blessed to land in an awesome institution. And he introduced me to a lady at the time who was head of sports medicine for female athletes at Tennessee, then Jenny Moshak, who gave me a small little grad, a few dollars, working in the sports medicine department with them. So I did my master's dissertation on ankle sprains, and then went back to do my PhD on functional ankle instability, so the kind of long-term deficits of people who've had a series of ankle sprains. And I did that again with the same dissertation supervisor, Dr. Rosemary Dyson, who is my undergrad dissertation supervisor. So blessed again to be in a nice environment with people and who were very, very supportive of me. But then kind of looking out of the box, obviously I could talk about the supervisors teams I work with, and I've got some excellent master's students and some excellent PhD students, and I've again been really lucky to work with some excellent collaborators where we've all got different skills trying to support the postgrad student or the master's student. But then thinking out of the box, I've kind of done a few other things I thought might be worth mentioning. Again, this is just encouraging people to try for things when they see them. So one of my undergrad students, he built, with my support, he built a like a balance device looking at, we're trying to see if there was different EMG activation on left and right foot if you loaded like a ski balance device slightly differently. It was really, really interesting. And we put in for a UK Sport Innovation Grant, and we got some money to develop that and put together a patent. Again, that was, again, just trying something that was maybe outside the box that we wouldn't normally have to do, wouldn't normally be on my to-do list, but we tried that. And then fortunately, I answered a phone call from a number that, you know, those phone numbers where you don't recognize them, you don't answer it. But this phone number, it looked like it was US based, and it was some people from New Balance in Boston who said they wanted me to do some consultancy for them. So I was, again, really lucky that I answered that phone, because if I hadn't have answered it, they'd have probably called someone else. And I've got a non-disclosure agreement, so I can't say too much about what we did, but they sent over some prototype shoes, and we did some work in the Biomech lab and with my team on those prototype shoes, and we've sent that back, and those shoes are kind of in the pipeline to eventually come out. But again, like I said, I can't say much more on that. Obviously, my work with bases, I'm again really lucky to work with a really strong team that we're hoping to add one more person to in the coming few weeks. But I've got a really good a group of people who support me in the bases division, and we're really pushing things forward from what's been done previously in that division. And I also sit on the bases board. And then to kind of keep me going as well, I support a female triathlete called Lucy Charles. Any of you know anything about female triathlon? She's basically the second best Ironman, female Ironman triathlete in the world. She just won the World Half Ironman Championship. So I do her SSC and support Lucy. And and I'm part of the team that's going to look to get Lucy to go sub 7 hours for the first, sub 8 hours for the first female Ironman, which is kind of like the Breaking 2 thing, but for Ironman, which should happen next May. So again, really lucky to be working with people and those connections in that environment. My area of focus I'm most focused on is a charity called Shine, which is a spinal lift charity. And this is an event I hosted at my university a few weeks ago. I love this image for a number of different reasons. It's quite poignant. This little girl on the top right is a wheelchair user. She's called Scarlett. And these are two of my students, and this is actually another one of my students, but they're helping the little girl do what we refer to as wheelchair cheerleading. And so this little Scarlett's the first time she's ever done the cheerleading, and she was actually overjoyed. What I love about this image here is this is my daughter called Scarlett, who on the day, it's the first time she'd ever been in a wheelchair, and she spent the day playing wheelchair basketball with all these wheelchair users, and absolutely loved it. Had significant delayed onset muscle soreness in her shoulders that night. She couldn't move her arms for about 3 days. This is a friend of the university, Susan, who leads up our our wheelchair basketball team. And then obviously we got some of the lads who were using frames to do some physical activity. So it was a really, really positive organisation. I'm doing quite a lot of work with them, and I've just been I'll probably be moving on to the board of trustees in a few weeks with them. Okay, 2 more slides and I'm done, promise. So image of my daughter on the right, but this kind of makes me think about the things that we're trying to do now. So we're, as a division, we're reaching out, and so we've obviously had this opportunity, and we're blessed and really pleased, and would like to highlight our thanks again for IWB for letting us come and talk to you today. But we've also had some interesting conversations with Amanda with reference to Black Biomechanics. We can do some work with them. Latinx are on my list, but I've got an asterisk there because I haven't managed to touch base or do anything with them. But as a division, we're very conscious about doing school and university outreach to encourage less represented or underrepresented groups into science or STEM in general. But obviously, if I had my way, it'd be biomechanics. And we're doing some work with reference to getting some webinars and links with schools where we can get some students experiencing and spending time with some really positive role models from people of a similar background, so it isn't just a white middle-aged men talking about biomechanics, which is what I'm trying to avoid. And we've also had conversations with IWB, and obviously it's really interesting, it's just coming with the news with reference to the IWB specific conference that you just mentioned, or part of the conference you just mentioned. So we're looking at trying to get an IWB or a focused area for the next BASES annual conference around biomechanics. It would be looking at either non-white biomechanists or female. So that's something we're quite excited about being able to do. And then finally, I just wanted to just kind of praise those of the people that are listening to this campfire. Was it called campfire catch up or something? As a member of staff who's until 3 or 4 months ago, I line managed 36 staff, and probably in, I don't know, in those 10 years, I've probably had about 15 mat leaves, and every single one of those women have apologized to me when they've told me they're pregnant. Please don't ever apologize to anyone for being pregnant. Every single time I've reached up and, where appropriate, hugged that member of staff and congratulated them. One of them was on Skype, so I couldn't do that. And I always kind of think that's, I would never want anyone to apologize for being pregnant. I think it's absolutely magnificent. And you should be in an environment where you should be pleased to tell someone that, and you shouldn't be concerned. But again, like a lot of the challenges I talk about are obviously different, because they're different kinds of stereotypes or different kind of barriers that people in this meeting will be potentially looking to break down or break through. But I think it's that part of it might be the stubbornness. So if you can take one thing out from my presentation, it's the stubbornness. And if there's nothing necessarily wrong to have a little chip on your shoulder about trying to prove people wrong, if the system has been kind of stacked against you. But I just kind of one final thought that I was kind of coming to, and as I wrote this presentation, it's similar to how I did a presentation for the Global World Spine Lifter organization a while back. And when I saw this slide, it kind of made me think of the same thing. And just to remember, and this is something from a male who line manages excellent male and female and non-binary staff, and staff from a wide variety of backgrounds and socio-demographic histories and legacies they bring. But I would just remind you that you are what you are, and then you will achieve what you achieve because you're a woman, not in spite of it. And I don't want you, and I really want to encourage people to actually embrace that. And I think that you, as a group, are doing excellent things to encourage younger biomechanists. I know a few people as members of IWB and taking a lot of excellent positive support and mentorship from this group, and some of my PhD students are part of this group, and other collaborators are as well. And they're just saying good things. So I just wanted to thank you for that. And I think I should stop talking. That's probably too long now. So I think that's me done. Not too bad time-wise. Over slightly. Just deduct some marks from Andrew.
It's okay, Andrew. I think you gave a great presentation, and seeing how even as a male, you may have had difficulties in the field, but you have not let them stop you. So I think I hope I can speak for everyone and say that it was well worth the minutes that you think was over. So at this point, I will bring all of y'all, you and Theo and Rachel, together for a panel discussion on BASES. You gave your back history, but now we would like to hear on BASES and what BASES is doing to bridge the gap or reach out to those that voices have not been heard in biomechanics, and how can we continue to uplift those voices, and what can we do to help them. So I will, give me 1 second, and I will pin everybody to spotlight.
Music.
Yeah, my Jeopardy theme song. And now I don't even see like their names. Oh, here we go. And Theo, where are you at? Theo's hiding from me. I don't see his name on the list.
I'm not hiding. I can see me right there. There you
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So yes, so please tell us about the Biomechanics Division of Bases, in case anyone who's wondering about that anyway. And what are you doing within your division?
Andrew, do you want to?
Yeah, so
the lead
yeah, just very quickly, we're quite a new group. So I was assistant chair or deputy chair for a while up till about Christmas last year. And then Theo had been in that group, but since then we've had Professor Nassos Bisas, we've added Rachel, and Saida joined in, did we say February, March time?
About that, yeah.
That about right. And the previous chair has moved on. And the positive thing is, one of the first things we started talking about when we got together is how are we going to get more people involved? How are we going to change the demographic of the people that are often involved? Even when you go to a biomechanics conference, it's people that often look like me, and I don't necessarily want that, because I want biomechanics to reflect what my student demographic looks like, and they definitely don't all look like me. It was one of the first things we started talking about. So we've got some interesting kind of projects coming through. One of the things we're doing with the school outreach is we've got a number of schools, and this is linked in through one of our so Saida, our student member. She's got her previous school, which is in Tower Hamlets in Southeast London. And I've got my previous senior school, or my old senior school, involved, and I've got 2 other schools that are involved. So we're going to try and start doing some little events where we can talk to children when they're a slightly more impressionable age about decisions going towards STEM. Obviously, we're more focused on biomechanics, but we're wanting to kind of make that as diverse a group of attendees, let's say, as possible. So that's one of the first things we've kind of wanted to do and kind of get out there. But equally, we want to continue to provide support and just where possible, advice, guidance for people who are kind of thinking and maybe going in this direction, or maybe they've done an undergrad degree and then people are actually thinking, well, actually not many of the people doing a biomechanics master's look like me because they're all male, or they don't look like me because there are females, but all the females happen to be white. And we really wanted to kind of diversify. And I think it's partially because as well, 2, 3, 4 of the members, we're actually quite a diverse little group. I know Theo's got his Greek background. I'm kind of half Maltese, so I've kind of got a little bit of Mediterranean in me. Nassos is Greek as well. Rachel's from Liverpool, which kind of is slightly different as well. And then kind of we've got Fran as well on the team. But I think we kind of looked around and said, right, what can we do that can reach out and kind of offer support? And again, we've had 2 really good events. We had a non-members event where we just had an open kind of Zoom event where we just invited people to come along. And we got some really interesting internationals come along and start asking questions about getting involved with bases. And then we also had a members one where we had a few members turn up as well, and also Chris Bishop from UKSCA, which was really interesting. So yeah, so we kind of want to change the way things have been done. Bases has its own EDI committee and outreach committee. However, we wanted to do our bit as well.
Yeah, I'm just very rudely jumping in there because I think that's important. I think it's good to see that base as a whole, as Andrew said, has its own committee driving the overall body, the overall organization. But I think it's important that we don't just rely on that or rely just on that. I'm not quite sure what the right order is there, especially because I tend to find that biomechanics in particular perhaps is very sort of white, middle-aged, male dominated in comparison to some of the other disciplines. And I think it's, and I hope I'm not putting Rachel on the spot there, but if I am wrong, please correct me. It's good to see that our division has an equal split of males, females at least. But I think it's very important, and I feel we are doing this. When by we, I mean Andrew, Nafs, and myself on this occasion, that the Fran and Rachel and Shaida are not there for the sake of it, but they have a very clear contribution, very informative contribution. So they're there to help, and we ask them, and they ask us, and we work as a team, which I like, rather than, oh look, we have an equal split, but we'll just let the girls talk and we'll do another talk type thing, you know. So it is very exciting. It is very enjoyable. It is, I think, for us, as Andrew was saying, it was very nice that we managed to develop this collaboration, because it was probably one of the first things, if not the first thing, that we discussed. Even as a transition was happening almost back before Christmas or after Christmas. So it's really good that we're moving towards that. And it is important it is important to have role models. I agree. And it is important to be able to say, oh, look, and it'd be important that one day it's not just this one person that I could look at, but there are various people that I could look at and say, listen, here's 10 people like me that have gone down that route. Maybe that's something for me, you know. That's, sorry, that I'm ranting on, so I'm going to stop. That's what I wanted to add.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to add on from that, I think as well, one of the whole reasons why we're trying to outreach into certain societies is that because it's all well and good us coming up with these ideas. However, again, we only represent a small population. We've, again, even though we're a diverse team, we've arguably come from all privileged backgrounds. So we want to make it accessible to everyone. And by coming to these societies and trying to reach out in that way, we want to hear from people what they would like to see, because there's no point us trying to host these events and make these connections if that's not what people want. So it's all about like getting the voices of everyone else and seeing how we can facilitate people into biomechanics and what they actually need from us, rather than us providing things that may just go to waste or that people don't actually want to see. So one of the things I actually saw on the IWB Slack chat was about grant applications, and that's something I thought was actually generally really useful across everyone. Something I struggle with, like I've had done successful ones already, the only two I've ever applied for. So I think stuff like that, we need to just make it accessible to everyone, and that's why we do want to try and engage many groups, and just make it a more global society where everyone feels like they can communicate with anyone. So yeah. Does anyone have any questions or about bases in general, or more about like anything that they'd like to see what we could do for IWB or for different levels of biomechanics?
I have two questions. I want to just clarify if BASE is open to those who are not in the UK, and if so, how can they really be involved in BASES and really, not feel like they're just wrote their name on a membership, and really be active.
I'm just copy and pasting the link in, but yeah, I can answer that if no one else is going to. I mean, to be fair, we've been working with BASES for the last 18 months, and we haven't been face to face. I don't know how tall Theo is, for example. Actually, no, I have met you, Theo. You came to campus once, but we were talking earlier about not kind of knowing people because you just know them through the cameras. But I think there's in the same way that I'm still a member of the NSCA, National Strength and Conditioning Association, because you still want to retain, and that's a US based, because you still want to retain insight, expertise, and the ability for networking, potentially collaboration, and things like that. So people overseas can definitely get involved. One of the things that we're pushing for BASES next year is for, even though they're aiming for a face-to-face conference next year, it'll be next November, is to enable a hybrid version so that people can still attend from overseas. During lockdown, I've been to some amazing events just through Zoom and Teams, etc., and doing online events. So there's definitely opportunity to collaborate there. And I think in a lot of cases, so I'm collaborating with some individuals looking in some ankle work. They're mainly in the US. And again, we're just doing that via Teams and online and WhatsApp and things like that. So for the ability to collaborate, I think actually one of the things came out in our open meeting, so the non-members meeting when we had the BASES division, is there were some individuals based, I think one guy was in India, one guy was in Pakistan, was saying, I would like to get involved in some research. They have the access to all these amazing participants, but they don't have the kit. So it's kind of how we can maybe work with them to either get some kit to them or kind of use those participants, or maybe adjust a study so that they can do the data collection over there. I think it's kind of global collaboration, so I don't think being overseas should be too big an issue. Go on, Theo. And
sorry, yeah, just to add a tiny bit to the other one, that BASES is member driven, is all the divisions as well as the association as a whole is member driven. So somebody, I guess what I'm saying is somebody having membership is not just a number that puts their membership on their CV type thing. So Andrew, you're going to take the question on the chat. Sorry, I just saw that popping up about the big.
I'll get that in a second.
Okay. So I guess what I'm saying is, Andrew already mentioned that we had even non-members meeting, open meeting to get ideas. We had a members meeting to get ideas, and I'm saying to get ideas. This is not just a case of, oh, well, what should our Twitter handle look like? These are ideas about how we move forwards. And Rachel was talking about what people want, and essentially this is it. Where do we want to move as a field? It's all well and good for us six to sit in a room, virtual or not, and come up with ideas. But ultimately, it's what people involved in biomechanics would want us to do for them and develop for them. And whether this is the simpler things such as webinar topics and what they would like to see, as well as the more sort of bigger vision and moving forward. So everybody's involved, or everybody can be as involved as they like, I guess is what I'm saying.
I should probably answer. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Yeah. So Paul's obviously with us, isn't he? I thought I saw Paul earlier. The biomechanics interest group is, and our division is slightly quirky in that it's the only part of BASES where there's a special interest group and a division. Those two things in all the other groups are basically the same group. So Adam has led on BASES Big for the last few years, and obviously he's linked it in with Paul and National Biomechanics Day. But I think the biomechanics interest group is basically a single event once a year, which is excellent, and those of you who have attended it will really enjoy it. It's probably the biggest collection of biomechanists in this country in a year when we're all on campus at the same place. It's excellent. But I think the webinar, the kind of the collaborative support, also the mentoring, the kind of work on collaboration on research and grants and stuff, and everything else is basically through the division. I think moving forward, it might not necessarily always look like this, but at the moment it's two separate entities. But again, Adam used to be the former chair of this division or director or leader of this division. So,
for us individually, Marisa, or for BASES? Oh, okay. So
I just have a comment.
Yeah, something I'd like to have a BASES presence. It's that's something that will have to go to the board, because that will be a funding request. But there is funds there. But that's exactly the kind of thing, Marissa, that we want, so that when those people are coming in from across the world to an event like ISBS, which obviously everyone knows is an amazing event, that BASES will have a presence there, and we can kind of meet, kind of make contacts and look to kind of work together with people. But yes, it's definitely on the to-do list.
Yeah. And hopefully,
Yeah, I'll definitely be there.
Rachel.
Being in my home city down the road, I'll definitely be there. So if anyone wants to come say hi, if anyone needs good local Liverpool bars, I'm sure I can help you.
Let's see if there are any other questions.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely a meetup sounds good.
I'm guessing that was spurred by the local bar suggestion there, Anna, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, in general, I think we're seeing kind of subgroups form. The Aussie team, Australia and New Zealand groups are very good at meeting, especially because, you know, a lot of our members are from North America and the UK, and so they kind of have some separate meetings as well. But I think it would be great, you know, to have, you know, localized groups, you know, women in the biomechanics community. They can join together, meet other women in biomechanics.
I think it's
we
really
have
important.
Started a bases channel for us on our Slack, but certainly conferences are a great way to meet in person.
Yeah.
It's also important for networking and for students to contribute to conversations with their PhD supervisors about examiners. Because if you don't know the area, I've had so many students say to me, if I've said, who do you think we should ask as your external? They say, oh, I don't know, who do you think? I'm like, well, no, by now you should know, you're a year or two in. And it's the same thing with reference to those are the people that might be interviewing you for jobs, to go in as postdocs. So from a networking viewpoint, it's really, really important. So yeah, so those kind of localized groups in like a specialized group within the UK and North America, I think are really, really important. Absolutely. The people interview, the people you see at conference, the people that are going to be interviewing you for either jobs or similar.
I also think, like, through personal experience, like starting a PhD in October 2020, so like the peak of COVID, having things like IWB bases is providing me so much CPD, and it's actually, I could say procrastinate, I could also help me develop professionally, in terms of there's been so many webinars, so many things to get involved in, that I want to continue that forward. And I think that's why I'm now like more driven to actually make something of it, make sure other people do engage in it, because a PhD can be a lonely place, especially during these times when I'm like still getting encouraged to work from home when I can, rather than only be in the lab when you need to be. So I think having communities like this and then being able to see them in person at conferences or meet virtually once a month is a good way to do it.
Absolutely.
And I think what we are getting here is we definitely go for a drink. Formally, of course, but yes.
No, but you're absolutely right. I was at the International Ankle Symposium in Amsterdam just before lockdown, so that would have been October 19. Sat at a table with, you know, Philip Gribble, oh my goodness, and like literally just people I've cited and referenced and kind of looked up to, and then Eamon turns around and says, "Oh, do you want to examine one of my MSc students?" Like, oh, like, and I kind of look up to Eamon, even though we're similar ages-ish, I think we are, but just things like that, and that's only because I could have gone to the pub to watch Arsenal playing in a Europa League football match, but instead I was at conference. I was like, no, I need to go and spend as much time as I can with these amazing people and amazing academics, Mac Hock, Chris Burkle, I mean, loads of Rachel Coldenhoven, Alex de Jong. I mean, I'm not sure, I think Alex is actually part of IWB, but and just by being in that group and kind of being out with those people, kind of connections and contacts and collaborations have come apart. So you're absolutely right. Any other questions?
I had more of a personal question. I don't know, it's not necessarily basis related, but hopefully it's okay to ask. You guys all have such interesting stories, and you've all made big transitions in your life, whether it be like changing subject topics or moving across to a different continent in some cases. I'm just curious, how have you tackled those transition times and you know, built that support network? How have you individually kind of done that for yourselves, and maybe give advice to anyone in our group going through that? And maybe we can get ideas too, in terms of how to do that virtually for our members.
Do you want to go first, Theo?
I can do. So for me, obviously the first cultural shock was the language. I knew some English from back home. I was probably ahead of my peers, but keep in mind that, you know, we learn to ask people, how do you do on the street, and a very, very formal way of English. So you come over here, you go to the pub and you hear 5 different type. The weather is a whole different thing. I was coming with loads and loads of coats on. So for me, it was a whole new experience. So it was just a case of accepting that I know very little, both from culture and topic. Get involved as much as I can, ask as much as I can. Most of the people that I tried to get help with were very, very helpful. Some were, well, not very helpful, but you get that everywhere. I mean, you can't just let that sort of keep you back. And it was just a case of asking and learning about things, you know? And that's how I dealt with that. If I can very, very quickly tell you how bad I was when I first came over, it's a true story. We had to do an assignment on the computer to assess our IT skills, and I haven't used a computer at that time. So I got a friend to show me how to use a computer. He showed me how to click on the blue W. That's Word for those of you that didn't get the reference on the blue W. Windows 3.1 at the time. Write stuff, click on save them, fine, no problem. Went out for food, came back to do my assignment, and I went to my block and I looked at the computers and I thought, yeah, I'm gonna go back, because the tower was flat and he showed me on a tower standing up. Obviously, I did not know that it is exactly the same thing. And because I wasn't shown on a computer that is standing up, that it was flat, I left. That's how bad I was. So I went to another place, true story. I went to another building in Coventry University, where he showed me how to use it, and used that computer with the tower up, which I knew how to use. That's how bad I was. So true story. That's absolutely true story. So it was just a case of accepting that I just need to learn, and I need to learn everything, I guess, you know. So it was a case of observing, engaging. I became part of Coventry at the time within the student representatives on the course. Also had international people involved in the student representation. So I put my name forward. I got, well, I'm saying voted. I don't know how many people voted. They said I was elected. So I was part of that to understand how things work, how feedback works, and how things improve. And it is a very steep learning curve, but I'm not entirely sure it can be done any other way. It's a very different culture, very different country, very different language. So if you don't engage with that, some people will go well, some people will go, terribly, spectacularly bad. But it's just part of the process, and that's what worked for me. I'll stop talking now.
I guess for me, I didn't have a language barrier. So even though Americans don't necessarily, especially in the South, deep South, they don't necessarily talk exactly the same way as I did. But no, for me, it was easier because we're speaking the same language, and I think it's as long as you're open-minded enough and you choose which discussions and battles to have with reference to politics and all the different kind of things that you then have to kind of bite my tongue for lots of different things, just because not saying my area or my approach is correct, it's just different from the UK when you go to the US. So when I first went to Campbell University in North Carolina, it was, and I don't drink alcohol, but all the other European students were really shocked when there's no alcohol at Campbell University because it's a dry county. So that's that's just a massive shock. And some universities, so at that university, they're not allowed to celebrate, or we weren't allowed to celebrate Halloween. for different reasons. So things like that kind of can be quite challenging. But in reality, it's just those things that maybe I mentioned on my slide. So resilience, just be confident. I think the best way to meet people if you're outside class is either join some kind of sports club or sports team, just get involved with like-minded people, whether that's it could be kind of like a hobby or actually just a society or a team. Again, I was just really lucky to going into environments where there was a lot of European athletes as well at Tennessee when I was in the US. So I wasn't just the only European on campus. There was lots of Australian, South African, Canadian swimmers at the university at the time as well. So kind of that side of it worked for me. And like I said, you just have to kind of use your accent for some things. I got off a speeding ticket once because I had a nice English accent. That's also good. Got free donuts at Dunkin' Donuts because the lady liked my accent. But equally, sometimes you just have to keep your head down and maybe not draw attention to yourself when you don't need to. But yeah, just be very aware of how things might be normal where you're from, and then they're not necessarily normal elsewhere. So when that lady at Campbell University, when she said we don't celebrate Halloween here, I could have had a kind of really interesting conversation about how Christmas trees are actually from kind of Vikings, and it's got nothing to do with kind of Christian, even though I'm kind of Christian Catholic. But do you know what I mean? And about the kind of symbolism of it all. But I just said, oh yeah, that's absolutely fine. You're in charge. I'll do what you want me to do. And sometimes you just have to bite the bullet. But then apart from that, it's just trying to be brave and confident enough to just ask people's advice. The person who should be answering this is Ramanda, actually, because I think her jump going from Mississippi to Loughborough is probably bigger than me going from London to Tennessee, because I don't think there's as much of a jump. But no, we've got great examples within IWB of people who've actually made those kind of jumps already and succeeded. I was so excited when I found out Amanda lived in England. I didn't realise. We need to get you involved a bit more with bases. Got some really cool ideas, and there's some things we can do. But
I wasn't as excited when I found out you went to Tennessee, but
I know, so there's a whole thing. There's a whole thing. And I watched Ramanda's brother play American football a lot of time as well, because he was at Ole Miss as a quarterback then. So yeah, so it's, but yes, what can you say? Those rivalries all kind of live long, but that's fine.
I think for me, like, I can completely relate with what like Andrew and Theo both say, but I think another thing is like is not to be worried about voicing your concerns about certain things as well. So like, for example, I'm working with an industry partner. I'm at second year into my PhD, and I don't have the product, a working pair of socks. And I bottled it up for months, and then just finally said to my supervisor, like, I'm really concerned. And 2 weeks later, it's not resolved. So I think sometimes you've got to put your own concerns behind and actually do what's best for you, even if it does mean not causing an argument, but maybe offending someone else, because if you don't push for it, it's never going to get done. And like other things, you've got to do the kind of like what makes you scared to a certain extent, obviously. But things like this, I'm dripping in sweat now because I'm so nervous just to talk to friendly people. But it's one of those things that I'm learning that it's going to be beneficial to me in the future. It's not as bad as you make it out to be. Everyone's so friendly. People are here to support you. I ask Kat plenty of stupid questions throughout a year biomechanics that I look back at now and think they were stupid questions, but they helped me at the time. And something that my running coach always used to say was like, if it's hurting you, it's hurting everyone else. And I always think that's like everyone's going through certain things. Like there's other PhD students, everyone's going through the same battles. The amount of times that I've gone into the lab this week and people have said, I'm considering dropping out, I thought that was just me. It's nice to think that other people have those thoughts, even though I don't want them to have them. It's comforting to know. So just expressing how you actually feel is a massive help. Don't be afraid to say you're feeling a bit down or to push like other things, but also celebrate the minor achievements. So yeah, I think it's just all about finding the balance and actually appreciating how far you've come and what you can do. So, yeah.
I have a kind of general question as well for everyone, because you've all kind of had really interesting pathways, and you've all said yes to things that have kind of taken you off in new directions. So I was just wondering what your take on when to say yes versus when to say no is, because if you don't say yes to things, you miss out on opportunities. If you say yes to everything, you either end up completely overwhelmed, or you end up later having to say no to something you would have really liked to do because you're just totally at capacity. So how do you make that decision?
I'll go first for that. I think, yeah, it's you learn to make the decision probably by making the incorrect decision and then reflecting on it and thinking, why did I do that? So my first 3 PhD students, I took on all at the same time. They were the best 3 students I'd ever had. They were all in the same year group. If I didn't take them on, they'd have gone somewhere else. That's a big steep learning curve. 3 all at the same time. But I think it's trying, for me, it's trying to, and I actually have a reminder in my phone that says, that reminds me about making intelligent decisions around work-life balance. It's not okay. I pulled an all-nighter the other week, like literally. The day I got my first COVID vaccination, a member of staff had submitted something that was too late, but I had to submit it the next day. So thank God I didn't have an allergic reaction to it. So I literally worked from like 7 till 7. Haven't done that since undergrad. But in reality, like, I won't let that happen again now. That's not appropriate for that other member of staff to miss a deadline to then mean that I've got to do an all-nighter so that we can meet the deadline within quality at our university. And it's the same thing for the kind of different things I've got involved with. When something arises, you've got to make a decision over whether does it or doesn't it fit in. If it fits in, but you've got to drop something else, is dropping the other thing okay, or is it time for that other thing to finish? And there's no point taking on something if you're not going to be able to do a good job. So it's kind of weighing that up. And also, for me, thinking about PhD students or consultancy or research projects, it's the people you're with, the rest of the support team, or the rest of the researchers you're working with, or the collaborators on the project, or in itself, the actual PhD student. Am I going to have to teach a student to write in English? Not that they're international, I'm just saying an English student who can't write very well, but might be a brilliant student or brilliant scientist, let's say, but can't write. I've then got to help him or her write 80,000 words. That's more drain on my time than a student who can actually write quite nicely when I've got to help them with SPSS or something. So for me, it's just kind of weighing up the situations. And also, the last thing I say is, will it add something to your CV? So when you get to a point where you've kind of supervised, I don't know how many else, we've supervised maybe 11, 12 PhDs now, will 13, 14, 15 make any difference? It will on paper, but could I spend something else, a bit more time getting some more of my own papers out because I'm not kind of supporting PhD students? So it's just kind of adding things to your CV, so you're constantly developing year on year, which is why I really loved Theo's and Rachel's timeline. I love the kind of the progression that's shown. I think that's really insightful as to when you do and don't take on projects and additional things. And also, it's okay if you love biomechanics, more than anything, but you get to a point where you like kind of the nitty gritty and the minutiae of kind of quality assurance, which is kind of where I've ended up. I can still kind of supervise my PhD students and do some of that, but I kind of always liked that, and that's fine. And if your mindset takes you down that route, great. But in academia, you'll eventually go towards one of 3 areas. So either kind of teaching and learning, kind of pedagogy potentially, just research, or kind of line management. And I have a lot of my staff get to that point when they're senior lecturers, or I don't know what that is in the US. Is that like an associate prof in the US? I'm not sure. Or assistant prof? Similar. So below, like 1 or 2 below a proper prof. And they're like, oh, actually, I think I like pedagogy and I want to go towards teaching and learning and that kind of side of things. And that's fine too. Rather than think, well, my PhD's in biomechanics, how can I end up in kind of quality or student support or whatever? Yeah, just it's kind of, again, I'll do a lot of things by instinct. Theo.
Rachel, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I've only really got like something small to add, like onto this whole CV thing. Like, I always try and go by, like, if it's not going to be beneficial to my CV, do I actually want to do it? am I going to enjoy it? Because more recently I've been trying to do everything that I think is going to enhance my CV, but realistically I don't enjoy it. So if I don't enjoy it now, I'm not going to enjoy it 5 years down the line. So why bother? And I know in some ways that sounds lazy, but for example, like Hawkeye, I think is a really good opportunity, but I want to be in a different role within that company. So I'm kind of sticking it out in case a future role comes up. But realistically, it's not where I want to be, but I know it's going to benefit my CV. Whereas there's other things I enjoy, for example, like performance analysis stuff. I generally just do it because I love the sport and I love performance analysis. But that's not necessarily where I'm going to end up. I hope I go down more research route or back into applied biomechanics. So I really think, for me, if it's not going to benefit my CV, am I going to enjoy it? And then does it fit in with the schedule? And again, priorities. So at the moment, like with the PhD, if it's going to distract me from that and the quality of research I can produce, then I shouldn't be doing it, because at the end of the day, someone's funding me to do this. It's not just my own work, it's theirs too. I'd rather produce something of high quality than do lots of half-assed jobs, really. So yeah, that's my take.
Anna, maybe cut the bit out about the Hawkeye from your recording. Just chop it out.
Yeah, sorry. That's just because it's cold in England.
Yes.
And sitting on the pitch line is very cold.
Yeah, I think there should be a Nobel Prize on somebody who's able to answer this question fully or being able to say no earlier on. I think for me, it's exactly like Andrew was saying earlier on. It just, I was very interested in everything. I actually have 3 papers in psychology, believe it or not. So I couldn't really mock you, Rachel, earlier about psychology, but I do have 3 papers in some psychological aspects. Everything interests me. Everything was exciting. I really wanted to be involved. And then you get burned and you learn that you shouldn't be saying yes to everything. But I think, well, I'm not saying it's for everyone. For me, it was necessary to go through that, to go through the fact that rubbish. I've said yes to 5 different things. They all have a deadline next week, right? No sleep, no food, no nothing for the next week until everything gets done. But also gives you, as Andrew was saying earlier, it gives you a time frame. So if somebody comes over and says, listen, I need help with this, you get some experience on how long this would require, and you can make a better judgment as to whether I can help somebody or not. So now I have become a lot better. I'm not going to say perfect. I'm going to say a lot better into being able to say, actually, I could do this, but it will be done in a month's time. Or, you know what, I could help with this, but I can only do so much. Or put the onus back to the collaborator sometimes and say, right, well, what is it you would want me to do? This is really interesting, really exciting. What is it you want me to do on this to help? And sometimes it's a case to say, listen, I'd love to do this. I'm happy to spend some time writing a grant to see if we can pull a student in, or a PhD or a research associate to run this. I don't have the time to run this myself. Similarly, and I think it is, you know, Rachel and Andrew both mentioned the CV, and I think it is that balance of, well, I call it the big-headedness. For me, it is about big-headedness balance, in the sense that I have X number of papers. Will getting an extra one do me any good in comparison to what I would have to give up to get that paper? So if I'm getting a paper on, let's say I'm working with a team that I know that I'll have to do stats and write up the paper, so to speak, and it will go to Journal of Walton and Kirkdale League in Liverpool, as opposed to doing some sort of work that will go to Nature, for argument's sake, then yeah, I prefer to have a weekend off and you know, do nothing and watch Friends on TV, or I don't know what I will do. You know, probably read biomechanics papers again, to be honest. But nonetheless, it's you don't feel the pressure of having to do it, because would I be gaining that much? Probably not. Is my own time a bit better, more preferable? Probably yes. But it might not be easy to get to that point until you have been burned a few times and until you have some stuff under your belt to be able to say, you know what, I don't really need this. I'm okay without this.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I couldn't actually see who asked it. So yeah, thank you who asked it. But it also made me think that the question kind of was more about, you know, when should you say no to things? I think we can also take that and flip that over to when should you say no to things? And I'll give you the context. So one of my PhD students, I actually believe she might be in this meeting. I don't want to embarrass her. She knows who she is. She wouldn't accept the university, our university this summer, still being really strict about letting people back in on campus to start testing again. And she wanted some kind of over 70s-ish to come in and do some very sedentary work. And she wasn't getting elite athletes to come in and be, you know, hyperventilating for 3 hours in a heat chamber. And she bless her, she didn't accept no. The powers that be were saying, well, actually, we're not ready to make that jump yet. And she pushed and pushed and pushed. And I came back from annual leave and I got a text. Actually, she may have texted me on annual leave and said, oh, by the way, I've got ethics approval. Sorry, not I've got ethics, I've got approval to bring people back into the lab. And I think that's an opposite kind of way we look at the when should you say no. Hers is when do you not accept no. And literally because of that student, that PhD student, other students are now testing the lab. And I think that probably saved other students a month or two, and it enabled that PhD student to get a massive chunk of testing done before she went on annual leave back to her family this summer, which hadn't been to Portugal for, I believe, nearly a year and a half. So yeah, I think sometimes it's the opposite and you just, don't accept no and kind of keep pushing down the barriers.
I personally love how all three of y'all spoke to prioritizing. As someone who's currently not in biomechanics for 9 to 5 and trying to transition back into biomechanics, there's like this subconscious need or thought for me personally to sign up for any and everything that I can to like get it on my resume and to be as best of a candidate I can be, to the point now where I've started running things by my husband because he knows that I will say yes and be like, oh yeah. And I'm like, babe, can I really do this? Like, cause he knows my schedule sometimes better than me. But I'm happy to hear y'all saying, don't be afraid to say that no to things that may prevent you to burn out, that may in the long run not make a difference. I know I've started to say personally for me is just combining things that yes, I love and have a passion for that will advance me at the same time, and just really being more conscious about what I say yes to, because my husband's like, no, can I do it? But yeah, so it's nice to hear y'all speak on the prioritizing and how you do that.
I think for me, Ormond, about exactly on what you said, I used to do that. I signed up everything and I did everything, and then you think, well, actually, if somebody asked me at an interview, right, give us an example. You have 3 pages of stuff you did. Give us an example of being there or doing that. Or if I just did it for the sake of it and I can't really provide some sort of in-depth explanation of what I did, how I contributed, what it made me learn, I don't know how important that would be then, but hindsight is a wonderful thing. When I was 25, I was doing everything. It's only through experience and getting burned that you learn, well, certainly for me. So I don't want to be sitting here appearing like a, know-it-all idiot, because I absolutely am not. It's through trial and error, let's call it, and fail spectacularly. How do you say it, Anna? Fail fabulously. It's through that trial and error process that you learn, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely agree. 100%. So much of what I've done is or achieved is because there's been really good people to work with. And that's finding the right people, maintaining those relationships, still, where possible, still supporting a PhD student after I left that university, for example. If the members of the team at that institution had dug their heels in, they could have said, no, he's off the team, he shouldn't be part of this process. But because the student still wanted my input and the team were open to that, that's positive. And you get another PhD completion out of it in a few papers, but that's because I made the right choice in the first place with the supervisory team. And I think that's quite often. I think my aunt, I mentioned it earlier, but my auntie has Down syndrome, and she's lived with us our whole life. And one of her centre, one of the classes they put her and her friends into was called Speaking Up for Yourself class. And I genuinely think we should put that into our undergraduate degrees. Personality, not just personality, but like lots more face-to-face, eye contact, conversational. Can you manage both difficult conversations and positive conversations? Because so much of what I see people who achieve things, it isn't necessarily because they're the best academics or they're the best bankers or the best whatever. A lot of it's personality, and you draw people towards you who want to work with you, want to become a part of your ideas or your project or your team or whatever. And I think that's so important. And I don't think we teach that enough. I definitely was, I was quite shy until I probably went to America and was just dropped in the deep south.
We have no strangers in the deep south. You're gonna automatically become a friend.
You can literally go into Waffle House. You can go to Waffle House like at 1 or 2 in the morning, and there's a lady who looks like she could be your nan, who'll just give you breakfast. Like that, you don't really have that in the UK in the same way. You can't just go and get a proper good kind of equivalent of a fried breakfast at like 2 in the morning.
When Theo was talking cultural difference earlier, I related when he said he went to the pub and there was all different things. Now I'm from the South, I'm used to like giving a nod or hello as we walk down the street, and here they're like, no. So, I have my own little issues, even though I'm American moving to the UK of getting used to things. Is there any other questions we have for Andrew, Rachel, or Theo? If not, I don't think we're doing breakout rooms. There's only 20 minutes left. So if you have any questions, please feel free right now to get them all out.
And if people want to contact us, please do so. So I'd put the BASES information on the in the chat there, but if not. Yeah,
and they are following us on Twitter. So we have been promoting this chat all week. So there are definitely Twitter handles going about if you want to contact them.
Good stuff. Thank you.
All right, people, I do not see any other questions, so we can end here. Thank you, Andrew, Rachel, and Theo, for your time. I am looking forward to, this is only the first, collaboration for us, people. We are planning to, make this a long-term collaboration between BASES and IWB. So I am looking forward to seeing what that means for both organizations and seeing what we do in the future. But I will leave you to your day, night, evening, afternoon, whatever it is. And we will see y'all next month for Damien's talk. Bye.
Thank you very much for having us. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.